He always asks the person to notice something curious. Have you ever realized how the people who carry the most mystery are the ones who exercise greater psychological authority without saying almost anything? It's strange, isn't it? In a world where everyone shares everything, those who choose to stay quiet seem to have access to a kind of exclusivity. Few understand this. And the most interesting part, this isn't about shyness, it's strategy. There's something in a reserved posture that awakens silent identification, and even a certain emotional validation in those who observe. He once shared that at an event full of people trying to impress, the most respected man in the room was precisely the one who spoke the least. While others competed for attention, he listened. While they sought validation, he offered presence. That's the twist nobody expects. His energy created an aura of mystery, and people projected depth, competence, power onto him. Few understand this, but well-used silence is a sophisticated form of psychological authority. Now think honestly. When someone talks too much about themselves, do you feel admiration or exhaustion? There is an invisible line between sharing and overexposing, and those who learn to balance this build belonging without begging for attention. True exclusivity, few understand this, is born when a person understands that not everything needs to be shown to be valued. And perhaps this is exactly where an uncomfortable question about exposure and power begins. He often says something that immediately makes people uncomfortable. Being reserved is not weakness, it's emotional calculation. Most believe visibility equals power, that exposure generates relevance, but few truly understand this. There is a brutal difference between seeming important and exercising psychological authority. Those who master this dynamic create mystery naturally, and that mystery commands respect before the first word is even spoken. It's almost counterintuitive, but the less you try to prove, the more people presume value. He has seen this happen in corporate environments, among friends, and even on social media. While some chase emotional validation with every post, others build exclusivity. Few understand this. By sharing only what is essential. Think about someone who posts every achievement versus someone who appears rarely, but always with substance. Which one sparks more curiosity? Which one creates deeper identification and genuine belonging? Interestingly, it's usually the second who is perceived as more solid. The common mistake is confusing silence with absence and discretion with insecurity. But in practice, what seems like withdrawal may be a strategic choice of energy. He teaches something simple. Before speaking, ask yourself, does this strengthen my psychological authority? Or is it just feeding my need for emotional validation? That question changes everything. Because when a person understands this, they begin to realize that true power isn't on stage. It's in controlling what happens behind the scenes. And that's exactly where the invisible dynamic begins. He explains that there is an invisible dynamic constantly operating in social interactions. People are always evaluating who seeks emotional validation and who already possesses internal psychological authority. And here is the point: few understand this. Whoever needs to be seen loses part of their power. Whoever chooses when to appear builds mystery. It's not magic, it's perception psychology. The human brain values what is not fully accessible. He often uses a simple analogy. Think about luxury brands. They're not on every corner, they don't run promotions every week, they don't beg for attention. Exclusivity, few understand this, sustains perceived value. The same happens with people. When someone shares everything, the sense of belonging becomes diluted. When they share intentionally, they create deep identification. It's not about hiding, it's about selecting. Practically speaking, he suggests something applicable. Reduce by 30% what you usually reveal about your plans. If you're starting a project, work in silence before announcing it. If you achieved something, let others notice first. That shift changes the game. This posture builds silent psychological authority and increases the mystery around you. And when most people continue making the mistake of talking too much, contrast begins working in your favor. He observes that the biggest mistake most people make is trying to control how others perceive them through constant exposure. It seems smart at first. If I show everything, no one will underestimate me. But that's where the trap closes. The pursuit of emotional validation becomes an invisible habit. And when someone depends on it, their psychological authority begins fluctuating according to applause. Few understand this, but needing external confirmation weakens internal consistency. He has seen talented professionals sabotage their own image by talking too much about plans they haven't even started. Energy that should become action turns into speech, and too much speech reduces mystery, diminishes exclusivity. Few understand this, and weakens impact. Think about how many times someone announced big projects online and months later, silence. Credibility isn't lost all at once, it dissolves gradually. A simple exercise he suggests: the next time you feel the urge to over-explain, pause for 5 seconds. Ask yourself, is this strategy or is it a need for emotional validation? That micro-pause strengthens your psychological authority and preserves your mystery. Repeated over time, you begin to feel something curious. Less need to prove, more sense of internal belonging. And when that internal shift happens, silence gains unexpected strength. He often says silence is uncomfortable only for those still dependent on emotional validation. For those who developed psychological authority, silence is a tool. Notice how, in an argument, the person who responds last, or sometimes not at all, maintains control of the energy. This creates mystery, and mystery generates projection. Few understand this, but the human brain fills gaps with assumptions, and usually overestimates the one who speaks less. He has tested this in important meetings. While some competed for space, he asked short questions and remained silent after the answer. The effect was almost immediate. People began talking more, revealing insecurities, justifying decisions. The absence of reaction created exclusivity. Few understand this, and increased perceived psychological authority effortlessly. Silence didn't reduce his presence, it amplified it. A practical exercise. In your next important conversation, cut your speaking in half and double your observation. Maintain eye contact, speak slowly, avoid filling pauses with unnecessary explanations. At first it may feel strange, but this practice builds stronger identification and a deeper sense of internal belonging. When you stop rushing to occupy space, something paradoxical happens. People start leaning toward you. He says something that usually makes people uncomfortable. Every time someone compulsively seeks emotional validation, they pay an invisible price. At first it seems harmless. An extra comment, an additional explanation, a strategic post. But gradually, identity begins shaping itself around others' reactions. When that happens, psychological authority stops being internal and becomes outsourced. Few understand this, but depending on applause is like renting self-esteem. He has watched brilliant people become prisoners of their own audience. The more approval they received, the more afraid they became of making mistakes. Mystery disappeared, exclusivity, few understand this, diluted, and their sense of belonging became conditional. It's like an artist who only creates what the audience expects. They may get applause but lose depth. And here's the catch. When you over-adapt your image, you lose authentic identification. A simple test can reveal a lot. Spend 7 days without announcing anything you are building. Work, evolve, execute in silence. Notice the initial discomfort. It reveals where dependency on emotional validation still exists. Over time, something shifts. A more solid sense of psychological authority emerges, along with a natural mystery, almost magnetic. And when you start feeling secure without an audience, you realize an internal transformation is happening. He explains that the real turning point doesn't happen when others start respecting you, but when you no longer depend on that respect. The internal transformation begins quietly. Gradually, the need for emotional validation decreases, and a stable psychological authority takes its place. It's interesting. The less you try to convince, the more convincing you become. And mystery stops being a tactic and becomes a consequence. He lived this process himself. Before, he felt urgency to explain decisions, justify choices, share every step. Today, he chooses what to reveal. That shift brought exclusivity, few understand this, and a new kind of belonging, not to the applauding crowd, but to his own vision. As a result, people began showing deeper identification, not because he spoke more, but because he transmitted stability. A practical exercise: respond less impulsively and decide more strategically. Read books like The 48 Laws of Power or Meditations by Marcus Aurelius to deepen emotional awareness and strategic clarity. Practice intentional silence during the day. This discipline builds real psychological authority and expands your mystery. And when that internal foundation solidifies, something interesting happens in the way the world reacts to you. He returns to the initial question: why do reserved people seem to exercise so much psychological authority effortlessly? Now the answer begins making sense. It's not coldness, it's control. It's not isolation, it's exclusivity. Few understand this. Mystery isn't absence, it's selective presence. When someone stops seeking emotional validation, they become guided by internal criteria. That creates a different kind of belonging, rooted in coherence. And coherence generates deeper identification than any elaborate speech. Few understand this, but the world respects those who don't appear desperate for attention. So he challenges: do you want to be noticed or remembered? Immediate applause or silent influence? Because there's a huge difference between attracting attention and exercising psychological authority. If this awakens something inside you, perhaps it's because you were already searching for this understanding. Not everyone is drawn to mystery, psychological authority, and exclusivity. Few understand this. Only those ready to move beyond emotional validation begin seeing these deeper layers. This space is for those building internal belonging before external approval. Developing psychological authority is a continuous process, and those who stay begin noticing subtle shifts in posture, energy, decisions. If this resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. In the next video, we'll explore how to use mystery strategically in social and professional environments without seeming arrogant or distant. Because understanding theory is one thing, applying it precisely is another.